I still remember the exact way his voice sounded when he said it. Calm, controlled, almost bored, like he was ordering lunch instead of trying to destroy my life. "I'll take everything from you." He didn't even look at me when he said it. He said it to his lawyer, like I wasn't even in the room, like I was already erased. And for a second, sitting there in that cold, overlit courtroom in downtown Chicago, I actually believed him. Because for 13 years, Ethan had been the kind of man who got whatever he wanted. And for 13 years, I had been the woman who made sure he could. I wasn't always this person, the one sitting across from her husband like he was a stranger. There was a time when I knew him better than anyone, back when we lived in that tiny one-bedroom in Logan Square, when our biggest argument was whether we could afford takeout twice in 1 week. Back then, Ethan was different. Or maybe I just saw him differently. He was ambitious, sure, driven. He worked long hours even then, climbing his way up in corporate finance, always talking about the next step, the bigger picture. But he used to come home and pull me into his arms like I was the finish line, like everything he was doing meant something because I was there. I used to believe that. I worked too, but my job was never the priority. Not really. I was a marketing coordinator when we met, making decent money. But when Ethan got his first big promotion, we made a decision. Actually, that's not true. He made the decision, and I agreed because it felt like love. "It doesn't make sense for both of us to be stretched thin," he told me one night, sitting at our tiny kitchen table with spreadsheets open on his laptop. "If I focus on my career right now, really push, we can build something bigger. You won't have to worry about work like this forever." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You deserve better than this grind." And I believed that too. So I scaled back, took a part-time remote role, then eventually left altogether when we had our daughter, Lily. That's how it happens, I think. Not all at once, just a series of small choices that feel reasonable in the moment, logical, loving even. By the time I realized how dependent I'd become on him, it didn't feel like a choice anymore. It felt like reality. We moved to the suburbs when Lily was 3. Big house, quiet street, good schools, the kind of place people drive through slowly and imagine their future. Ethan thrived there. Bigger job, better title, more money than we'd ever had. He traveled more too. New York, San Francisco, sometimes even overseas. At first, I missed him. Then I got used to his absence. That's probably when things started to shift, even if I didn't fully see it yet. He stopped asking about my day. Not that I had much to report beyond school pickups and grocery runs, but still. He stopped noticing things, like when I cut my hair or when I started going to the gym again. Our conversations became logistical. "Did you pay the electric bill? What time is Lily's dentist appointment? Can you pick up my dry cleaning?" It wasn't a fight, that's the thing. If we'd been screaming at each other, maybe I would have realized something was wrong. But silence is easier to ignore. The first time I felt that sharp, uncomfortable crack in everything was a Tuesday night in October. I remember because the air smelled like leaves and cold rain, and I had just put Lily to bed. Ethan had gotten home late, like usual. He dropped his bag by the door, loosened his tie, and went straight to the kitchen. "I'm starving," he muttered. "I made pasta," I said, trying to sound normal. Cheerful, even. "It's still warm." He nodded, already scrolling through his phone as he sat down at the counter. I stood there for a second, watching him, waiting. For what, you might ask? I don't know. A thank you? A smile? Something. Anything. "Who are you texting?" I asked finally, keeping my tone light. He didn't even look up. "Work." It was such a quick answer. Too quick. "Work?" I repeated, stepping closer. "At 8:30 at night?" That's when he looked up, and for just a second something flickered across his face. Annoyance. Not guilt. Definitely not guilt. "Yeah," he said flatly. "That's kind of how my job works, Emma." I felt my chest tighten at the way he said my name, like it was a problem. "I was just asking," I said quietly. "Well, don't," he snapped, then went right back to his phone. That was it. That was the whole moment. But something inside me shifted. After that, I started noticing things, little inconsistencies. The way he'd angle his phone away from me, the sudden password change on his laptop, the extra hours at the office that didn't quite add up. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself this is what happens in long marriages. People grow distant, busy. I told myself a lot of things. Until the night, everything stopped being explainable. It was late, past midnight. Ethan was on a business trip in New York. Lily was asleep upstairs, and I was sitting on the couch, half watching some reality show, half scrolling through my own phone. That's when it buzzed. A message request from a name I didn't recognize. For a second, I almost ignored it, but something, maybe instinct, maybe dread, made me open it. The message was short. "Hi, I think you deserve to know the truth about your husband." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering, not sure if I wanted to respond or throw the phone across the room. But I did respond. "Who is this?" The typing bubble appeared almost instantly. "My name is Rachel. I've been seeing Ethan for 8 months." I wish I could say I reacted dramatically, that I screamed or cried or broke something, but I didn't. I just sat there, completely still, like my body had shut down to protect me from what my brain was trying to process. 8 months. 8 months meant it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a whole separate life. My hands started shaking as I typed back. "You're lying." Another immediate reply. "I wish I was. I didn't know he was married at first. He told me you were his ex, that you two were separated." Of course he did. Of course. "There are pictures," she added. "Messages. I can send them if you want." I didn't want them, but I needed them. Send them. What came next felt like being slowly suffocated. Photos of them together, at restaurants I recognized, places he told me were client dinners. A selfie of them in a hotel room, his arm around her, both of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. Then the messages. God, the messages. The way he talked to her. Soft, attentive, funny. The version of him I hadn't seen in years. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Thinking about you all day. You make everything easier." I felt like I was reading texts from a different man, or maybe the real one. I don't remember how long I sat there. Minutes, hours, time stopped meaning anything. Eventually, Rachel sent one last message. "I found out about you last week. I ended things with him. I thought you should know." And just like that, she was gone. I was alone in my living room, surrounded by the life we built, holding proof that it had all been a lie. When Ethan came home 2 days later, I didn't confront him right away. That probably sounds crazy, but I needed to see him, to look at his face and figure out if there was anything real left in it. He walked in like nothing had happened, kissed Lily on the head, asked me what was for dinner, like we were still us. That's when I realized something that scared me more than the cheating. He didn't think he'd get caught, and worse, he didn't think I'd do anything even if I did. So I waited until Lily was asleep. Then I walked into our bedroom, closed the door, and locked it behind me. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone. "Who's Rachel?" I asked. He froze, just for a second, but it was enough. Slowly, he looked up at me, and in that moment, I knew everything I needed to know. He didn't even try to deny it. That's what hit me first. Not anger, not heartbreak, just this cold, hollow realization that whatever version of Ethan I had held on to all these years, he was gone. Or maybe he'd never really been there. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked, his voice steady, almost clinical. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's your first question?" He stood up slowly, like he was calculating his next move instead of reacting. "Emma, I'm asking you something." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You don't get to ask anything right now. You answer me." For a second, we just stared at each other. The tension in the room felt thick, suffocating. Then he sighed, actually sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. "Fine," he said. "Yes, I know Rachel." The simplicity of it knocked the air out of me. "Know her?" I repeated. "That's what you're going with?" "What do you want me to say?" he snapped, irritation flashing across his face now. "You already seem to think you know everything." "I don't think," I shot back, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay composed. "I saw it. The pictures, the messages. 8 months, Ethan. 8 months. Something in his expression shifted. Not guilt, not remorse, just annoyance that the situation had escalated. He ran a hand through his hair. She had no business contacting you. That's when something inside me broke. Are you serious right now? I whispered. That's what you're upset about? That she told me? She crossed a line, he said firmly. Whatever was going on had nothing to do with you. I stared at him, trying to process the words. Nothing to do with me? I repeated slowly. I'm your wife. He didn't respond right away. He just looked at me with this detached expression, like he was already mentally somewhere else. That's exactly the problem, he said finally. The silence that followed felt deafening. What does that even mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It means, he said, his tone flattening out again, that this, us, hasn't been working for a long time. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. So your solution was to start a whole relationship with someone else? I asked.
To lie to both of us? He shrugged, actually shrugged. I didn't plan it, he said. It just happened. I laughed again, but this time it sounded sharper, almost unrecognizable. 8 months doesn't just happen, Ethan. That's a life. It wasn't a life, he said quickly. Don't exaggerate. Don't. I stopped myself, pressing my hand to my forehead as a wave of dizziness hit me. Do you even hear yourself? He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. I took a step back, trying to put physical distance between us because suddenly the room felt too small, too tight. Does she know? I asked. Does she know that you're still sleeping in this bed? That you're still playing house with me and Lily? I told her we were separated, he said. Were we? I shot back. Because I must have missed that conversation. He exhaled sharply. Emma, don't do this. Don't do what? I demanded. React to the fact that my husband has been lying to me for almost a year? You're being dramatic. That word, dramatic, it landed like a slap. I felt something shift inside me again, but this time it wasn't breaking. It was hardening. I'm being dramatic? I repeated, my voice going quieter, steadier. You cheated on me for 8 months. You built a whole relationship behind my back, and I'm the one being dramatic? He looked at me like he was tired, like he'd already checked out of the conversation. I didn't say it was ideal, he muttered. Not ideal? I echoed. That's how you're describing it? What do you want from me, Emma? He snapped suddenly, his patience finally cracking. An apology? Fine. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry you found out like this. The words hung in the air, empty and hollow. You're sorry I found out, I said slowly. Not sorry you did it. He didn't respond, because he couldn't, because it was true. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself to stay upright, to stay present. Is it over? I asked. With her, he hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. She ended it, he said, not me. Of course she did. Do you want it to be over? I pressed. Another pause. I don't know, he admitted. That answer hurt more than anything else. Not a yes, not even a convincing lie. Just uncertainty. I nodded slowly, absorbing it. Okay, I said. He frowned slightly, like he wasn't expecting that reaction. Okay? Yeah, I said, my voice eerily calm now. Okay. I turned and walked out of the bedroom before he could say anything else. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't wake Lily up or call my friends or my mom. I just sat in the living room in the dark, staring at nothing. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to fix it. I was thinking about what my life would look like without him. And that thought, it didn't terrify me the way I expected it to. That's what scared me. The next morning, everything felt surreal. Ethan left early, like always. No conversation, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Just a quiet exit, like the night before had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I made Lily breakfast, packed her lunch, walked her to the bus stop. I smiled at the other parents, made small talk about the weather, nodded along to conversations I barely heard. It was like I was watching myself from the outside. When I got back home, the silence hit differently. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loud.
Every room felt like it was filled with something unspoken, something heavy. I walked into our bedroom and just stood there. The bed was still unmade. His side looked exactly the same as it always did, indented, familiar. And suddenly, I couldn't stand it. I stripped the sheets off the bed, every last one, and shoved them into the laundry basket like they were contaminated. Then I opened his closet, row after row of perfectly pressed shirts, suits organized by color, shoes lined up neatly on the bottom shelf. This life, this carefully constructed, polished life, it felt fake now, all of it. I reached up and grabbed one of his shirts, the blue one he wore to Lily's school recital last month, the one I told him he looked good in. For a second, I just held it. Then I dropped it on the floor. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't need to. Just seeing it differently was enough. By the time Ethan came home that evening, something had already changed in me. He walked in, set his keys down, glanced around like he was assessing the atmosphere. "You okay?" he asked, like it was a routine check-in. I almost laughed. "No," I said simply. He nodded once, like he expected that. "So, what now?" he asked. That question, so casual, so detached, like we were discussing weekend plans. I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms. "Now?" I repeated. "Now we figure out how to end this." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You're serious?" "Very." He studied me for a moment, like he was trying to figure out if this was another dramatic reaction that would pass. It wasn't. "Divorce?" he said. "Yes." The word felt strange on my tongue. Heavy, final. But also, right. He nodded slowly, then let out a breath. "Okay," he said. "If that's what you want." If that's what I want. I didn't even bother correcting him. Because deep down, I knew something he didn't. He thought this was going to be easy, clean, that he'd walk away with his life intact, maybe even improved. He thought I'd fold the way I always had, compromise, accept less. He thought I was still that woman, the one who gave up her career, her independence, her power. He had no idea who he was dealing with now, and neither did I. Not yet. But I was about to find out. The first thing Ethan did after I said the word divorce was open his laptop. Not to talk to me, not to ask about Lily, not to sit down and figure out what 13 years of marriage meant when it ended. No, he went straight into strategy mode. I watched him from across the kitchen as he leaned against the counter, typing, his face lit by the cold glow of the screen, focused, efficient, like this was just another problem to solve. "Already?" I asked quietly. He didn't look up. "I'm reaching out to my attorney." Of course he was. "Right," I said slowly. "Makes sense." There was a time when that kind of decisiveness impressed me, made me feel secure, like I was with someone who always had a plan. Now it just made me feel erased. "Emma," he said, finally glancing up, "we should try to keep this as straightforward as possible, for Lily's sake." I almost laughed at that. "For Lily's sake?" I repeated. "You mean like the past 8 months were for her sake too?" His jaw tightened. "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "You already started it. I'm just reacting." He exhaled slowly, clearly trying to keep control. "I don't want this to turn into a mess." "It already is a mess," I said. "You just didn't notice because it wasn't affecting you yet." That hit something. I saw it in the slight flicker in his eyes, but it passed quickly. "It doesn't have to get ugly," he continued, ignoring what I said. "We can split things fairly." "Fairly," I echoed. I let the word hang there, turning it over in my head. "What does fair look like to you, Ethan?" He straightened a little, like he'd been waiting for that question. "The house gets sold," he said. "We split the proceeds. I'll cover child support, obviously. You'll need to figure out your own income situation, but we can discuss some temporary support while you get back on your feet." I stared at him. That was it. That was his version of fair. "You've thought about this before," I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer right away, but he didn't deny it either. "We've both known this hasn't been working," he said carefully. "No," I said, shaking my head. "You've known. I've been trying to fix something I didn't realize you'd already given up on." He looked away. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a hint of guilt there, but then it was gone. "You'll be okay," he added, like he was reassuring me about a job interview. "You're smart. You'll figure it out." That's when something in me snapped into place. Not emotionally, logically, because I finally understood exactly how he saw me, as someone who had nothing. No career, no income, no leverage. Someone who would have to accept whatever he decided was fair because I didn't have the power to fight back. And the worst part? He wasn't entirely wrong. At least, not yet. Okay, I said. He blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Okay? Yeah, I repeated. We'll do it your way. Suspicion flickered across his face. Just like that? Just like that, I said, holding his gaze. He studied me for a moment, trying to read between the lines, but I kept my expression neutral, calm. After a second, he nodded. Good. That's good. He went back to his laptop, already moving on. And that's when I made my first real decision. I wasn't going to fight him the way he expected. I wasn't going to scream or beg or try to negotiate from a position of weakness. I was going to let him think he was in control. For now. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat in the guest room, my room now, and opened my own laptop. It felt strange, almost foreign, like I hadn't used it for anything serious in years. Because I hadn't. I typed 3 words into the search bar. Divorce lawyer near me. The results flooded in, but one name kept popping up. Strong reviews, aggressive, strategic, exactly what I needed. I stared at the contact button for a long moment, my finger hovering over the trackpad. This felt like a line I couldn't uncross. Once I clicked, everything would become real. Not just emotionally, but legally. Final. I thought about Lily, about the life we'd built, about the version of myself I'd been for over a decade. Then I thought about Ethan's face when he said, "You'll be okay." Like I was a project, a problem to be managed. I clicked. The next morning, I got a call. "Emma?" A woman's voice said, clear and confident. "This is Jessica Harper. I got your inquiry." Her tone alone made me sit up straighter. "Yes," I said. "Thank you for calling me back." "Of course," she said. "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" And for the first time since everything fell apart, I told the whole story. Not just the cheating, everything. The career I gave up, the financial dependence, the house, the way Ethan had already started positioning things like it was a done deal. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush me. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then she said something that changed everything. "He's underestimating you." I blinked. "What?" "From what you've described," she continued, "your husband believes he has the upper hand, financially, structurally, that you'll accept a quick settlement because you don't have the resources to challenge him." "That's pretty accurate," I admitted. "No," she said firmly. "That's what he thinks. It's not the same thing." I felt something stir in my chest, something unfamiliar. Hope. "But I don't have a job," I said. "I've been out of the workforce for years." "And you supported his career during that time," she replied immediately. "That matters. A lot. Courts recognize that." I leaned forward slightly. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," she said, her voice steady, "this isn't as one-sided as he wants you to believe. Not even close." My heart started beating faster. "For example," she continued, "the house isn't just his asset. It's marital property. His income, also relevant. And given the length of your marriage, you may be entitled to more than just temporary support." More. The word echoed in my head. "Additionally," she added, "if there's evidence of infidelity, that can influence certain aspects of the case depending on the jurisdiction." I thought about Rachel, the photos, the messages. "I have proof," I said quietly. "Good," she replied without hesitation. "Keep everything. Do not confront him with it. Do not let him know what you have." A slow, almost dangerous clarity started to settle over me. "Okay," I said. "Also," she continued, "I need you to do something else." "What?" "Stop agreeing with him." I let out a small breath. "That might be hard, I understand," she said. "But every time you concede, even informally, you reinforce his perception of control. We need to shift that dynamic. Shift the dynamic." I thought about the conversation in the kitchen, the way I said, "We'll do it your way." Maybe that wasn't weakness. Maybe it was positioning. "What's the next step?" I asked. "We meet," she said, "in person. We go over everything in detail and build a strategy." Strategy. That word felt different coming from her. With Ethan, strategy meant control. With her, it felt like protection. "No one takes everything from you," she added. "Not if you're willing to fight properly. Fight." I ended the call a different person than the one who started it. Not stronger, exactly, but aware. Aware of the fact that this wasn't over before it even began. That night, Ethan came home like usual, but this time I saw him differently. Not as my husband, not as the man who built this life with me, but as my opponent. Did you talk to anyone? He asked casually, setting his keys down. About what? I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The divorce, he said. Lawyers, I mean. I shook my head. Not yet. That wasn't entirely a lie. I just hadn't told him. Good, he said, almost relieved. We can probably avoid getting too many people involved if we handle this ourselves. I nodded slowly. Maybe.
He glanced at me like he was trying to read something beneath the surface, but I didn't give him anything, because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to him. I was thinking ahead, and he had no idea. The first time Ethan realized something was off, it wasn't because I said anything. It was because I stopped. I stopped asking him where he'd been, stopped reacting to the late nights, the clipped tone, the way he moved through the house like it was a hotel instead of a home. I stopped trying to fix conversations that died halfway through, stopped filling silence with questions he didn't want to answer. At first, I think he liked it. It made things easier for him, cleaner. No emotional mess, no confrontations, just two people coexisting while the paperwork caught up. But then the shift started to bother him. I could see it in small moments. The way he lingered a second longer when I didn't look up from my phone. The way he'd start to say something, then stop when I didn't immediately engage. The way his eyes would track me across a room like he was trying to figure out what had changed. It wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, but it was happening, and I let it. Behind the scenes, everything was moving fast. I met Jessica 2 days after our call. Her office was exactly what I expected. Glass walls, clean lines, nothing soft about it. It felt like a place where people came to win, not to talk about feelings. She shook my hand like she already knew me. Let's get to work, she said. And just like that, it began. We went through everything. Finances, property, accounts I didn't even realize existed until she started asking the right questions. Do you have access to his business accounts? She asked. No, I said. I never needed to. She gave me a look, not judgmental, just pointed. You need to start needing to. I nodded, absorbing every word. She explained things in a way that made the fog lift. Marital assets, hidden income streams, deferred compensation. Things Ethan had never bothered to explain to me because, in his mind, I didn't need to know. Now I did. People like your husband, she said at one point, flipping through a set of notes. They rely on 2 things, information imbalance and emotional control. I leaned forward slightly, meaning, he assumes you don't know enough to challenge him, she said, and he assumes you're too emotionally tied to push back effectively. That landed hard, because it was true, or at least it used to be. So what do we do? I asked. She looked at me directly. We take both of those advantages away from him. There was something about the way she said it, calm, certain, that made me believe it was possible. From that moment on, I followed everything she told me. I gathered documents quietly, tax returns, bank statements, anything I could legally access. I started paying attention to details I'd ignored for years, the way money moved, the patterns in his spending, the accounts that didn't show up in the obvious places. And the more I looked, the more I realized something that made my stomach turn. Ethan hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been planning. There were transfers, small enough not to draw attention, but consistent, money being shifted into accounts I didn't recognize, investments that weren't listed in the usual summaries he used to show me during tax season. It wasn't illegal, not exactly, but it was intentional, calculated. He was positioning himself. I sat at the dining table one afternoon, papers spread out in front of me, my hands trembling slightly as everything started to connect. This wasn't just about walking away. He was trying to walk away ahead. When I brought everything to Jessica, she didn't look surprised. He's preparing for asset division, she said simply, trying to minimize what appears on paper. Can he do that? I asked. He can try, she said, but it won't hold up if we trace it properly. That word mattered more than I expected, because for the first time in this entire situation, I didn't feel alone. Is this going to get ugly? I asked. She didn't sugarcoat it. It already is. He just doesn't know it yet. That night, I watched Ethan differently. Not emotionally, strategically. He sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware that I now understood the game he was playing. And for a brief moment, I wondered what he would do if he knew. If he knew that the woman he thought he could quietly push aside was now documenting everything,
building a case piece by piece. If he knew that every move he made was being observed, not with hurt, but with clarity. "Something on your mind?" he asked suddenly, glancing up at me. I met his gaze evenly. "No." He studied me for a second longer than usual, then nodded. But I could tell. He felt it. Not the details, just the shift. A few days later, his lawyer contacted me. Not directly, of course. Everything went through formal channels now. Jessica called me as soon as she received the initial proposal. "They've sent over a preliminary settlement," she said. My chest tightened slightly. "And?" She paused for half a second. "It's aggressive." I let out a slow breath. "Define aggressive." "He's offering you the house proceeds split, limited temporary support, and a structured child support plan," she said. "But he's significantly undervaluing several financial components." Of course he was. "He thinks I'll just accept it," I said. "Yes," she replied. "He does." I stared out the window, watching the quiet street, the normal life that kept moving like nothing had changed. "Then we don't accept it," I said. There was a small shift in her tone. Approval. "Good," she said, "because we're not going to." She walked me through our counter strategy. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't reactive. It was precise. "We'll request full financial disclosure," she explained, "and we'll challenge the discrepancies we've already identified. Once that process starts, he won't be able to maintain this narrative of control." "And if he fights it?" I asked. "He will," she said, "but that's where it becomes his problem." Something about that sentence settled deep in me. His problem, not mine. For so long, everything had felt like mine to fix, mine to manage, mine to absorb. Now, for the first time, the weight was shifting. The official response went out 2 days later, and that's when everything changed. Ethan came home earlier than usual that evening. The front door opened with more force than necessary, his footsteps sharper, faster. I was in the living room, sitting on the couch when he walked in. "Did you hire a lawyer?" he asked, his voice tight. I looked up slowly, calmly. "Yes." The silence that followed felt charged. "You said you hadn't," he said. I said not yet, I corrected. That was true at the time. His jaw clenched. "You went behind my back," he said.
I almost smiled at the irony. "Behind your back?" I repeated. "Ethan, you've been living an entire double life for 8 months. I think we're past that argument." "That's not the same thing," he snapped. "No," I said quietly. "It's really not." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly now. "They're asking for full disclosure," he said. "They're questioning accounts that have nothing to do with you." "Everything you earned during our marriage has something to do with me," I said, holding his gaze. That stopped him. Not completely, but enough. "You don't understand how this works," he said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "I understand more than you think," I replied. And that was the moment, the exact moment I saw it, this shift. For the first time since this started, Ethan didn't look at me like I was predictable. He looked at me like I was a problem. And I realized something that sent a quiet, steady confidence through my entire body. The man who once said, "I'll take everything from you," was starting to realize he might not take anything at all. And it was only the beginning.